Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Lance Knob with Denali Consulting and 4% Breakthrough Communities. And I'm so excited to be here today with Marcel Schwantes, keynote speaker, author, leadership coach, podcast host, Love in Action. He's got an upcoming book we're going to talk all about. So, Marcel, I would love for you to share your story, your backstory for those who don't know you, and let us know how you've grown to over 2 million reads per month on Inc. and 360,000 subscribers on your LinkedIn newsletter. How have you done all that?
I have no idea. Game over. So Lance, it's funny that when somebody actually aspires to fulfill their calling in life and they stick to it, things start to happen. And so I go back to 2012, doing the corporate grind. I was an HR guy, 18 years of doing that. Helping to lead leaders and putting together programs on employee engagement, how to get the best out of your people, blah, blah, blah. After a while, you just kind of like, okay, is this all there is? There's got to be more to life than this.
Sure.
So I decided to, pick up everything that I learned and all of the research that I did and all of the skills that I built up to that point. And it was actually convenient that my last job was a layoff. And so at that point, 2013, I decided I'm not going back to corporate life. I'm going to start my own business. And so 5 years of eating top ramen and wondering, where am I going to pay this bill this month? Things started to happen. And one of those things was, I sent in an article. I submitted an article to Inc. magazine, Inc.com.
Okay.
And it took them 6 months to reply to finally acknowledge that they even had gotten my article. And I thought, oh, that's great. Okay, they wanted to publish my article. I had even forgotten what it was, what I wrote about. And I guess the response was pretty well as far as traffic wise, because they have to meet their numbers and bring lots of ads or traffic to point people to their ads. So and so they invited me back and offered me a columnist role. And then from that point on, things started to take off. The keynotes started to happen more frequently. And then, I started to do some more leadership coaching, development, built a course online for leaders to learn skills. And I'm like, at some point, leadership practitioners and coaches, they're a dime a dozen.
Sure.
So what was it that's going to differentiate me from the pack? Well, I decided that how I came up through the ranks and learned the best leadership philosophy that I found to be most effective was servant leadership. Okay. And as I looked around, I'm like, well, who's doing the servant leadership training these days? And sure, there are some people that actually do it. There's a few at university level that do it quite well. Ken Blanchard, of course, does a really big, comprehensive servant leadership training. But I thought, I got to bring this down to the little people, to maybe that company that doesn't have the budget to afford a Blanchard style training, but they're about 500 people and they're growing, but yet their managers are like struggling with their people skills. Okay. So I thought, that's it. Those small to medium-sized companies is what I'm going to cater to teach the elements of servant leadership. And so that began the new journey. And I've never looked back, and here we are, 7-8 years later. I'm sort of I've been tagged the servant leadership guy.
Congratulations. So good to know your full backstory. Yeah. And I know you're coming all the way from Tennessee, and I was going to ask you your niche. So now I really know it is servant leadership, and you're starting to kind of shape up even sort of your ideal, business size that you really serve. I just finished speaking to our mutual friend who introduced us, Rob Holman, and we were working on speaking and getting on more stages and just refining everything. So my question for you is, what is your core message with your writing, your speaking? It's so hard to really drill down further and further. So, what would that be for you?
Well, it's slowly evolving into a place that is going to be or feel very uncomfortable for a lot of people, Lance. Okay, so and that sort of is a little bit of a segue into my book that's being my manuscript that will be published in the fall of 2024, not this year, next year.
Yeah, very exciting. Okay,
it's just that speaking of Kim Blanchard, I'm going to bring him back for reference. Okay. So Blanchard and I are talking on my podcast, and he drops this line: servant leadership, because that's what we were talking about. That was the topic. He said servant leadership is love in action. Guess what the title of my podcast is? Love in Action. And I got that from Ken, right? And I fully acknowledge that. I give him credit all the time that moniker Love in Action came from that quote. And so what I found out is, the more I investigated and researched the principles of servant leadership, it really comes down to love. Now, when people hear the word love, they think of all these squishy things. They think of romantic love and love for family and partners, etc. But what we're talking about is that when you focus on the needs and the development of people and the well-being of people, and when you work on behalf of them to benefit them, you're loving them pretty well. So it's a case for love and care. Some people call it care.
Yeah.
But I go one step further. I don't want to mince. I mince no words. I'm calling it for what it is, right? That good leaders love well. And when I speak of love, I speak of agape love in the Greek sense of the word. It's the love in action. It's a verb, right? So there's results tied to it. It's not a feeling or an emotion. It's an action. What are we doing on behalf of bettering people's lives every day? So when you get up in the morning and you decide, okay, I'm a leader or I'm a manager, your point by the end of the day is to answer this question: what have I done to make someone's life better today?
Right.
That's your purpose as a leader. And so I think that that all ties to, all right, well, how can I love well day in and day out? And in fact, I always ask this question of every guest that comes on my show. What is it? How is it that you can demonstrate that kind of action, those behaviors, to love people well day in and day out? What does that look like, practically speaking? And the answers I get are awesome, right? It varies. I mean, I get all kinds of stuff.
I'm sure. So good. It makes me think of Stephen Covey. And he had a phrase in 7 Habits of being love, which I use, in coaching myself so often, right? And when relationships get challenging or, when times get tough, just to be love. He was actually talking about, relationships with his wife and just partner relationships. He's like, it's not realistic to be in love, right? That's not the right perspective, but be love. So, I love the love. So since we touched on it a little bit, tell us about the book. I've written one book, and I've just written a chapter in a compilation book, but I'm working on a partnership book, and I know how hard it is. Oh, and by the way, for everyone listening live, I know Rob Holman is there. Shout out to you, my friend. But throw out your best questions for Marcel. We will tackle them all. We've already got one from Rob. So throw out your questions. But Marcel, tell us a little bit more about the book. This is going to be your first book, and I know you've spoken all over the world. So and done so many things in 7 or 8 years that you've had your business.
Yeah, and you only got one question from Rob. I thought he'd be sending in 5 or 6 by now, so he's slacking off a little bit.
Oh yeah, he's coming.
Yeah, so you want to know more a little bit about the big idea behind the book? Is that what I'm hearing? Because I was
yeah.
All right, so the big idea behind the book, it's a book on love in action, basically. And so what I've done is I've taken the world's religious principles and then looked at the science behind it to apply it towards business. right?
Right.
So one of the famous scriptural references, if you come from a sort of a Judeo-Christian perspective, is found in the book of First Corinthians. And this is famous for, when people get married, the pastor or the priest talks about love is patient, love is kind, and all that. So those verses, I was able to boil all of that down into 6 practical ways that leaders can be effective and make the business case, of course, for leading that way. So what I came down to is a framework built on these 6 principles: patience, kindness, humility, selflessness, advocacy, and trustworthiness. So that's the framework for the book, that I'm building all my case for love around those 6 principles. And that's what the book is about. And of course, when I say I'm bringing the science, this is a business book, not a religious book, right? So what I'm doing is I'm taking those foundational principles that we find in faith-based settings, right? And I am proving the case through the literature and the evidence that it is as effective, if not more effective, in the business world as well as a leader.
So
there
good.
you have it.
I love the framework. What are you learning about yourself? And, what are your takeaways already in writing the book? Because I know it happens to everybody when, I learned so much in really trying to put my best stories and messages together. So yeah, what are some of your maybe surprising takeaways? Or
Well, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And what's interesting about this book is I started it before COVID. And so then, COVID hits, I had to push pause because my publisher, had to push pause. Everybody just kind of hunkered down for a while, right? And then the world literally changed overnight. And here I am writing a book pre-COVID. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't apply anymore. So I've had to pivot myself about what is it that makes an effective leader post 2020 or 2021, if you will. And so things are drastically different. One of the things is, I started out researching patience. How does it apply these days to leading with love, right? And so what I found in my research, and continue, because that's the chapter that I'm actually working on right now, is that we have to go slow in order to make progress.
Okay.
So many leaders are stuck in this sort of this toxic mindset of hustle culture, where they think they have to do more, and they think they just have to load up their plates to be productive. And in doing that, you become impulsive in your actions because you're not stepping back and seeking various perspectives from various stakeholders across an organization. So that speaks to patience. Is take your foot off the pedal and pause to reflect and process what's going on around you, especially when things happen after COVID, when the world became so uncertain. A lot of people made mistakes by going too fast instead of slowing down.
Right.
They lost their patience. So we have to go back to being patient, being slow, being methodical around decision making. And so a lot of that I speak on in the patience chapter.
Okay, so good. And on this topic, is there any ways that you're already applying either this information on patience, or your first 3 chapters that you've completed in your life, or anybody that you're serving?
Well, the selflessness. Funny that the question you ask is pertinent to the coaching call I had with a client. Literally was at 12:30 Eastern. I had about 3 hours ago.
Okay.
And we were talking about listening and active listening, not just listening for the sake of hearing words coming out of people's mouths. But we're getting to the point where, because of our devices and because of our just all of our distractions, not just distractions with things that we hold in our hands like this that keeps beeping and distracting our attention, but also the distraction inside our own heads, because we have so many voices speaking, internally about, well, should I do this? Should I do that? And we're dealing with our imposter syndrome. We're dealing with, our shame, sometimes our own inability to, integrate our thoughts. We're scared. Okay, well, if I say this, what's going to be the reaction? So there's a lot of stuff going on, internal scripts that play in our heads that doesn't help us to make sound, wise choices. And so what I said in the coaching call this morning is, one person said, yeah, we keep miscommunicating.
Okay.
And I said, how much of that has to do with the lack of listening, to be able to actually park your thoughts in the moment, be present with someone, cut off all the distractions, and just be there for the other person, to listen first, to understand before speaking, to be understood. It's like listening first to understand what's going on the other side. Yeah. And I think that speaks a lot to quite a few chapters of my book. Selflessness for one, patience for sure, right? Because our first instinct is, we're hearing somebody speak to us and we're already forming an opinion in our heads. This is what I need to say. Here's going to be my rebuttal. And we stopped listening in the process.
Right. Okay.
So that's not listening at all. That's competing, right? You're trying to get your point across before the person is even done talking. So I think that's one of the things that I have learned for me, is to be able to just be present with someone and let them speak until they're done, and be present to what they're saying, to what they're speaking. That's the hardest thing to do.
Very difficult.
9 out of 10 people in that class is that, hey, because I told them, you need to park your thoughts. And 9 out of 10 of them says, I'm having a hard time doing that, parking your thoughts. What that means is you park what's going on in your head to be present to the other person. And they all acknowledge that that's definitely a struggle.
Sure. Even right now, right? It's so, in conversations, you get so excited, right? And you want to share all the things. One thing that you made me think about is one of my favorite TEDx talks by this monk, Don DePani, and it's called Unwavering Focus. And it's really, the main message is unwavering focus to the people you're with. Practice every day. And it's so easy to say, but it's hard to do. It's really extremely challenging.
Yeah.
So, and when you mentioned imposter syndrome, I don't know if you made me think of my friend Chris Kelso, and hopefully you guys connected because you guys aren't far apart in Tennessee, but he wrote a great book called Imposter Syndrome. So did you ever connect with Chris?
I haven't connected to Chris yet. Okay. I think that we're emailing back and forth. We just haven't nailed the time to get together yet.
Awesome. Well, let's address Rob's question. We'll see if we get any more, and then we'll jump back into some other things. But, on the topic of love, what has being a great dad taught you about love?
To be selfless, really, Rob. But thank you for that. And it's like being a dad. You have to really relinquish I'm not saying that you relinquish your rights. You don't lose yourself as a dad. Retain all of the parts of yourself, right, that are true to you. So you're still being true to yourself and your wishes, your desires. But you got a little guy. In my case, I got a 10-year-old, and his needs come first. And so I have had to kind of, sometimes the things that I want to do, I have to put aside and be able to serve the needs of this person first, who is in the formative years, right? Being 10, he's still developmentally in need of that direction, that nurturing, that guidance, right? And isn't that funny? Because that's what leaders do. It's no different in the workplace. If you are a leader of people that may be younger than you, your role is to guide and nurture and speak truth into that person, just like I'm doing to my 10-year-old son.
For sure. So I love that. And on the topic of leadership, I know you do a lot of writing on the topic. So, how can all the leaders, no matter what age we are, I've got a 16, 14, 12-year-old as well. So young to adults, how can we take the next step forward, no matter where we are now, to improve our leadership skills? Do we need to read the book, listen to the podcast, find a mentor? How can we advance things?
Okay, I'll give you a practical tip, and then I'll point people to where they need to go. Okay, the practical tip is based on research. Research found that the higher up we go up the corporate ladder, up in the leadership ranks, the less we listen to feedback, because we think in our minds that we have all the answers. And a lot of that has to do with putting up sort of this facade of trying to project yourself as being the expert, as being the know it all, right? And so what happens is that as you go up, move up chain, get promoted over and over and over, you're getting less and less and less direct feedback on your performance, on the performance of your employees, on where you're headed, and so that's my number one tip: is how do people get started in becoming a better leader? Is to accept feedback, and that's a very humble thing to do, right? And so you can do that through various mechanisms. You can obviously do that by just sitting down with one-on-one with somebody that you trust, an employee, a peer, a coworker, and ask about your performance as a leader.
Okay.
The other way you can do it is collectively gather data. And that's where, people like Rob and myself come in. We're consultants, maybe you too, Lance. And, we have our feedback mechanisms, our surveys, and we can gather the data that points the way forward to leaders to address those gaps or those blind spots, if you will. And so if you want to learn more about, staying on track with, okay, what is servant leadership, and how do I get on board with the servant leadership way of leading and being more effective?
Please.
The best way to do it is just, I'm pumping out content almost 2 or 3 times a week on my LinkedIn newsletter. So I'd like to point people forward to that.
Please.
And the other place they can go to get lots of practical skills, advice, is on my podcast, the Love in Action podcast, which Rob and I sometimes co-host.
Okay. And I know you and Rob have a collaboration in 2 days as well. So let's share that with everyone. And
Rob and I, we do what's called a leadership. It's a monthly leadership conversations. So if you go to his profile, Rob Holman, or myself, Marcel Schwantes, you'll see in our posts, we're promoting that right now. And which is a leadership conversation, is a way for people to come in, engage in an actual conversation. That's not Rob and I, throwing bullet points and PowerPoint slides and give you the 5 steps of whatever. No, we're actually talking about real issues that leaders are facing right now, and inviting people, hopefully the people listening to this very show, into the conversation. We allow them to provide input and ask questions, and we address those together and hopefully come out with a really good solution.
So good. And Hannah, who's helping us backstage, Hannah Hernandez, thank you so much for all your help and magic. She'll probably post the links into all these things so everyone pay attention, either live or in the replay. And Marcel, I feel like it would be powerful to hear a recent powerful story about one of these clients you've served that might have been a medium-sized company where the managers were struggling, and how they had a transformation and really made some headway. Anything come to mind?
Well, a quick one would be I actually shared this with Rob, and I shared this on the podcast a while back, is somebody that is going through a tough recovery process. Perhaps there's a loss, whether it's a loss of life that somebody that they know it's to be able to grieve, and grieve well. We never think about these things in the business world. What? Grieving? It's a foreign concept, but grieving is sort of the ability to take a step back for your own recovery, your own self-care, your own quote self-love, and just kind of stop the wheels from going into motion, because when we don't grieve well, we don't recover well, and so our productivity, our performance hinders, and it's going to impact those around us. And so if you are experiencing a loss, or if you have gone through a transition in life, and that in itself feels like a loss, right?
Sure.
Maybe you've been uprooted from your house, you moved, or you transitioned from one career to another. It's not going well, and we all have some kind of grief going on. Is to be able to just take the time to just grieve well and allow for that season of life. Talk to people and express what that feels like. Express your pain around that, right? And so, yeah, be present to the grieving process. And I think that's one of the things that I advised a middle manager of one of my clients to do, because he had lost his son 6 months prior and hadn't taken the time off because he wanted to just keep plugging away.
Right.
And he didn't know that it was affecting those around them, especially his subordinates.
Okay.
Because he was checked out, and he didn't really know. He didn't really have the awareness to know that his performance was really affecting others.
Right. So he wasn't in touch, and probably wasn't taking feedback, and maybe he was kind of numb and wasn't performing well, and just wasn't there. Okay.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So he was able to get back on track personally, and then the organization moved forward. He moved forward. Okay, great. I love that. So is there anything right now in the midst of writing a book and speaking all over the country, all over the world, that is really new and exciting to you? Any new things that you have coming out? Any things that are kind of pulling at your heart?
Yeah, with every book launch, you always try to have like a pre-launch, and on the way to your launch party. And I know I'm a little bit early on the pre-launch, but I'm gathering people to join the conversation of the Love in Action book that I'm writing, to kind of understand, here's what I'm finding out. Here's what the research is pointing towards, leading this way. And so if you want to jump on board this pre-launch train, and get connected with me to find out what I'm discovering and as I'm writing the book, it's like I'm putting that out on the podcast as well as the LinkedIn newsletter. Connect with me either way. And then you'll be in touch with the books, what's happening with the book right up to the launch. So you'll be able to stay informed that way.
Okay, I love it. And everyone, please, definitely take advantage of that. Pre-launches are fun, and you're going to get incredible value, just like all the Inc. readers and the LinkedIn newsletter subscribers. So many people, including myself, are really want to get their message out more, whether it be through a book. And speaking is very difficult. So you've really, reached massive success in speaking. What would be your words of wisdom for people either at the beginning or middle, just trying to get on more stages, get some paid speaking, get their message out there more? How can they move forward and get further?
The best way for me, and hopefully this is a personal testimony that can be replicated over and over and over again, is to start writing. Okay. And that doesn't mean go out and write a book. It just means that put out content and have a message that you can stay consistent around, so that people can kind of get to know what you're about, what your why is in a Simon Sinek fashion, right? We need to know first what our why is. What is our message? What is it that we want to get out to the world that's going to make a positive difference in the life of others? and then start writing about it. All right. And then build up an audience that way. And to me, when people start to notice, they'll invite you to speak.
Okay. Is that how it happened for you?
Very similar. Very similar. And I already had a little bit of speaking even before my my Inc. appointment, because I was doing webinars way. I mean, even before there was such a thing. I think I was doing webinars way back in 2008, 9, around there. So in that sense, I was speaking way back then for a lot of my internal clients, right, in the corporate world, like doing webinars for other departments, for other divisions of companies, et cetera, that were across the country. So
okay. So good. Yeah. For all the speakers out there, definitely heed Marcel's advice. Just start writing, figure out your why. Those things all resonate with me, especially that purpose conversation, the why, the mission. That's the first step of my book and book process of the 4% breakthrough. So I love that. So Marcel, we talked about so many good things. If you could boil it all down and, just give everybody a nutshell of, key things to do to continue to put love in their life, and any messages that we didn't get a chance to touch on that you want to include, and then wrap up all the best ways for people to stay in touch with you, be part of your launch team, follow you, engage with you, seek you out for help.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, I mentioned this earlier, when you put yourself in the esteemed role of a leader, and don't take that lightly. If you decide one day, yeah, I think I'm going to be a leader, do it for the right reasons. Because at the end of the day, being a leader is about meeting the needs of others. Okay. And in doing that, you're going to create a huge impact around you, and it's going to benefit you as well as a leader. But you do it to benefit others first. And then watch as good things start to happen all around you as you empower others to be and do, to be their best self and do their best work. And the best way to reach me is on my website, marcelschwantes.com. And then again, find me on LinkedIn, Marcel Schwantes, and connect with me there. I'd love to have conversations with people there, and engage you in what's going on with my world, and be part of yours.
For sure. And when is, I think you said March, right? Spring of 2024 is our expected book launch?
That's when I need to send my manuscript in to the publisher. And then the publishing world takes a little bit of time to get it out to the masses. And that would be fall of 2024.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, we were going to subscribe and be part of the engagement. Any help you need along the way, early readers, let us know. And Marcel, can't thank you enough. Hannah, thank you for putting all those links up. I can see them. Everyone, please reach out to Marcel on all things leadership. I know I've really benefited on a topic I already love on leadership, and I can't wait for the book. So Marcel, thank you for all the gold and the wisdom, and for joining us today. Definitely look forward to keeping in touch.
Excellent. Thanks, Lance. Appreciate the time.
Okay. Thanks, Marcel. Talk soon. Bye, everybody.